Beautiful, Darby. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Reverend Juanita, of and for love, such a presence of love for all of us in this church. We so appreciate you. Again, just so grateful to be back in front of you after a hard week for me. I'll share a little bit more about that with you later. But I want to begin by saying that what I've found to often be the biggest obstruction between where I am and getting to what I want is the apparent way to get there. And by that I mean the major things that we want in our lives in terms of quality of being, quality of life, love, meaning, fulfillment, prosperity, joy, and a consistent peace of mind. Sometimes the biggest thing that seems to stand between me and these things is the way I'm told I'm supposed to get there, or the way that I thought I'm supposed to get there that I've tried over and over and over again. So we've been brought often to think that the way to get to true love is to meet someone and get married as soon as possible and settle down. Or the way to success and prosperity is to work so hard that you never ever take a break, you just keep at it. Or that the way to be happy is to be polite and kind to everyone, never speaking what's on really your mind. Or that the way to be spiritual is to give a lot of lip service to the idea of being one with everything around you, and to have a certain self-righteousness in which you feel better than everybody else. There's a lot of different ways out there to get to what we want that sometimes makes us wish we could go the other way. That we could do almost the opposite, that sometimes maybe even doing the opposite of the usual way could help us get to where we want faster. Do you ever feel that way?
Absolutely.
Absolutely? All right, thank you. There's an amen out there somewhere. But it's kind of like, well, Jesus, maybe it's not do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Maybe it's do unto others and then run.
Yeah.
Benny Hill said that. That one's not for me. But I want to speak a little bit to the idea today that there's actually a lot of wisdom in going the other way. Not necessarily in completely rejecting, or as I was saying, doing the opposite as the way that's been presented to us, but in a way that helps us transcend the way as it has been normally laid out for us. Something about this idea of going the other way is something that I've learned a lot about by getting the opportunity to study a lot of the different spiritual philosophies and religious faiths out there. And one of the things that I think I've learned about so many of them is that they aren't really born of originality. A lot of the great spiritual philosophies aren't necessarily born in an original creative moment, but in opposition or in intentionally going the other way of the status quo of the dominant philosophy or thinking of the time. One of my favorite examples of this is a little difficult because they came up at the same time, but is Confucianism and Taoism. So around 500 years before the Common Era, there was this very hip guy named Confucius. And Confucius used to talk about the Tao, or the way. And Confucius decided that the way to live at one with the Tao, or the way, is to realize order. Realize the orderliness of the universe. Confucius would say, to put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must cultivate our personal life. We must first set our hearts right. And this makes a lot of sense to me, doesn't it, to you? Yeah. If you want your life to be in order, you first must get yourself in order. So Confucius taught that the way is through discovering your social order, living up to your social role in the family and society and doing it the best you can. Then you can live at one with the Tao. Well, around the same time, there was a person that we've come to know as Lao Tzu. And he wasn't as left-brained as the Confucianists were. And this idea of living in order, it didn't really suit his stomach. It didn't quite fit him. So he decided that he would declare that the way to live at one with the Tao is to realize complete and utter disorder. To realize that the universe is disorderly, and that the way we truly learn to live at one or in harmony in the Tao is to actually reject our social role and our way of being in society, to realize our true self. Lao Tzu was a very rebellious spirit. He would say things like, "Stop thinking and end your problems." I'd love to get that out of the fortune cookie. I'm just going to stop thinking. We'll just end this right now. What difference is between yes and no? What difference between success and failure? Must you value what others value, avoid what others avoid? How ridiculous. And he goes on, other people are excited as though they were at a parade. I alone don't care. I alone am expressionless, like an infant before it can smile. Other people have what they need. I alone possess nothing. I alone drift about like someone without a home. I am like an idiot. My mind is so empty. I'm just thinking of all the right occasions to say anything. It's my secret way of making a confessional to you all. Other people are bright. I alone am dark. Other people are sharp. I alone am dull. Other people have purpose. I alone don't know. I drift a wave on the ocean. I blow as aimless as the wind. And so Taoism, which Lao Tzu is known to be the founder of, is something that stretched and wouldn't exist, I would believe, if Confucianism wasn't there. And Lao Tzu has been a great example of the rebellious spirit of going the other way, which again isn't about rejecting the way that is there, but utilizing it, using it as a springboard to find a better way for yourself. If we move forward in history about 500 years to the time of Jesus, we'll find that Jesus was one who practiced the other way as well. Jesus was someone who was very committed to his Jewish faith, yet he had two major things about it that he couldn't quite stomach. The first was that the idea that God would be available to only one kind of person, as opposed to all people. The other thing that Jesus wrestled with was this idea of the purity laws, or the rules that were often practiced in the faith. Not that he didn't find them sacred, but what he found is people would be so righteous in them that they would cease living a moral or spiritual life because following the rules was more important than practicing the love or the wisdom of the divine. And so Jesus decided to go the other way. He declared there are not many rules or laws to follow to be one with God. There's only one, to love. To love God with all your heart and to love one another as if they were yourself. So here is again an idea that I don't think would have come about if there wasn't that particular way that he needed to pivot from, to understand or to get to. Fast forward almost 2,000 years in history to the northeastern states in the 1800s, where one of the most dominant ways of thinking was the Calvinist model of thinking. Anyone grow up Calvinist here? I'm sorry. No. But part of the Calvinist teaching, especially during that period of time, is that we're not just born into sin, but we're really born wretched. That we are really born bad boys and girls, that our soul has really been soured because of this whole original sin thing. And so the Calvinists taught this idea, and they also taught strongly this idea of predestination. The idea that your whole life is sorted out from you, even in the sense that even if you repent to God, it doesn't really matter because God has already decided whether you're going to go to that eternal fire or live with Him in heaven. So the best that you can do is just pray that God has figured your soul out. So this was a dominant strand of thinking of the time that we see in different aspects of our society today. But the intellectual folks in New England at that time really couldn't stomach this idea either. So they decided to declare something different. They decided to go the other way. And they said, you know what? we're not born sinners. We're not born broken. In fact, we're born beautiful. In fact, we're born whole, perfect, and complete. And sin is something that we learn along the way. This is quite a profound idea. And they said, you know what? We don't like this idea that we're not at choice. Not only do we believe that we're at choice, but we believe there's an impersonal principle, a way that God acts in life that is supportive of all our choices, even when they're not in our own best interest, because that's how we bring God and the Spirit to life, is through our own free will, through our own volition. And does anyone know what the seeds of this philosophy would come to be called? It's our own teaching right here. This idea that we are born in the perfect and divine image of the divine. And as we learn to remember and cultivate in that life through the power of our own choice, we can realize and embody that divinity. And so here's an example of going the other way. So we can reject the Calvinists, but we should also thank them a little bit too, because we were able to pivot. So all these great religious teachings, in a sense, teach us, again, not to always go the opposite way, not to reject the way before us, but to practice an other way that is willing to walk through and transcend, perhaps, the path that is before us with our own divinity. As Emerson said, who was one of those very wise people in New England at the time, he says, let us take our bloated nothingness out of the path of divine circuits. Let us unlearn our wisdom of the world. Let us lie low in the Lord's power and learn that truth alone makes rich and great. You know, if we're not walking our own path in our life, we're walking someone else's path. If we're not thinking for ourselves in our lives, we're letting someone or something think for us. So the goal and the key to going another way in our life is through discovering and articulating our own authentic and sincere way. To honor and respect the way before us, but to recognize that it can't be any other way but the way that we sincerely make it. And again, we can't do that by rejecting the path. Many of us, we learn this as teenagers, because it's the way of the teenager to often practice the rebellious path, right? Dad, you say yes, I say no. You say fast, I say slow. You say up, I say down. I'm quoting an AC/DC song. But what often happens to the rebellious teenager, 20 years later, they look in the mirror and they say, I've become my father. I've become my mother. So the path of rejection, or trying to go the opposite way, actually leads them right to the path of not being conscious. And usually they're proud, by the way, to wind up hopefully a little bit more like their parents at that time in life. But the lesson is not to reject any way in front of us, but to learn to live with it in a way that we can transcend it by bringing our authentic spirit. Most importantly, we have to really learn what it is we really want from life. This comes back to those major qualities. Is what I really want from life love, happiness, peace, or is it just to get mixed up in the path, to have the drama or the struggle in between? I've learned when it comes to many of the major issues or obstacles that I've found in my path, not that they're not challenging, but first and foremost, they're my blind spots. They're my blinder spots, because they're the things that I get caught up in that cause me to forget what it is that I really want, what it is that I'm really here for. I get in a fight with my partner and I think everything's about being right and correct, and I've forgotten that what I really want is a sense of love and celebrating life. I get caught up in trying to be polite and nice to everyone, that I forget that what I really want is a sincere experience, which means once in a while you may have to tell someone what's really on your mind. And that's something about living the other way. It's about finding the way that we're living that may not be working for us and bringing in, yes, in some ways the opposite. If you're being really polite, maybe you need to speak a little bit more of your mind. But it's really not about bringing in a different strategy of acting in our lives. It's about bringing our whole selves into our life. It's about bringing our whole being. And it's then that life and the path of life has a way of responding in a real powerful way. I love the scene in Alice in Wonderland, in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, where Alice confronts the Cheshire Cat, and of course she's gone into Wonderland and she's got no idea where to go. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. So long as I get somewhere, Alice added as an explanation. Oh, you're sure to do that, said the cat, if you only walk long enough. And there's a lot of lessons about the path in here, that any path will eventually take you somewhere. But remember, if you don't know where you're going, then nowhere is always where you're getting to. So it doesn't matter what path you take. That's exactly where you're going to wind up. Lewis Carroll would capitalize on this idea in a later quote. He'd say, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. But there's the other way. The other side to that is if you really know where it is you want to go, if you really know the qualities of life that you're wanting to experience and engage, well, guess what? It doesn't matter where you are, because any path will get you there too. Because you have that clarity that it's love that you're after. That's a state of peace of mind and at one with the spirit that you're after. Which means that the path that you're on now, no matter what you're confronting, no matter what the challenge is, because you are that divine and powerful being, can become your perfect pathway to getting where you want to go. The key is not getting caught up in the obstructions, but always remembering and keeping that end point in mind on every step of the journey. There's an old story about a bird who sees a piece of meat on the ground, and it's very excited and grabs that piece of meat and it flies up in the air. And before too long, the brother and sister birds see the bird has the piece of meat and they start chasing after him and they fight with him and they get the meat away even before the bird gets a bite. And at first the bird's really upset. But then he says, well, I may have lost the meat, but at least I have gained the peace of this immense sky. And the very simple moral of the story is it's often in life that we get caught up. We find the meat. We find the thing to get caught up and we get really excited about it. Life becomes a struggle. Life becomes difficult. There's something about fighting for the meat. There's a lot of good in that. And yet, there's something when it's been taken from us, when it's over, we've got to remember what we're really here for. We've got to remember the immense sky that holds us in. That no matter what may be challenging us, we can actually utilize it to remember why it is that we're really here, no matter what. When we're clear on where we want to go, anywhere can get us there. We've been having a forgiveness class. We have a couple more sessions on Tuesdays. Folks are invited to come at 6:30. But last week we talked a little bit about Desmond Tutu and the Truth and Reconciliation committees that took place in South Africa at the end of apartheid. And here you had this commission of people in South Africa who really decided, the whole community, except for a few people, really decided that they wanted peace and harmony in their society. So this Truth and Reconciliation Committee was formed so that people who were victims of racial violence during apartheid could tell their stories, tell how they'd been victimized. And it was also a place for perpetrators, people who would victimize others, to come and share their sins, what they were sorry for. And no matter what people were shared, the idea is that forgiveness would take place. You know, what a brave and kind of wild idea to have something like that, no? But it would have never happened if there wasn't a consensus, and some people still criticize the process, so I feel it's important to recognize that. But for the most part, there was this consensus that said we wanted harmony. We want harmony in our society. And the way that we get there isn't through just pretending stuff didn't happen, right? It's through being willing to confront it and to be able to collectively and consciously choose something greater. Tutu would say of forgiveness, he says, forgiving and being reconciled to our enemies or our loved ones are not about pretending that things are other than they are. It is not about patting one another on the back and turning a blind eye to the wrong. True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the hurt, the truth. It can even sometimes make things worse. It is a risky undertaking, but in the end it is worthwhile, because in the end, only an honest confrontation with reality can bring real healing. Superficial reconciliation can bring only superficial healing. And that's a key to bringing a new life or a new way to our path. Unless we are willing to see the folly of the path that we're on, or the folly of the way that we've been doing things that may not be working for us, or the hurts that have taken place, we can't truly move forward. This teaching as well teaches us that the greatest other way of all time has always been to love. is to always learn that eventually this whole being angry at someone thing may not be serving us so much. That this whole being judgment of this particular person or these types of people or even ourselves may not be serving us that much. That the most radical, inventive, and creative way is always love in our lives. To take that person we've been practicing being mad at or reacting with anger towards them when they do something that upsets us, and to say, how can I best love you right now? How can I best support you? Is to sometimes bring the most radical spiritual element there's ever been to life. In a very simple example in his book, Essentialism, Ray McQuinn talks about working with someone at your job who maybe isn't getting an assignment done on time. He says, to reduce friction with another person, apply the catch more flies with honey approach. Send him an email, but instead of asking if he has done work for you, which obviously he hasn't, go and see him. Ask him, what obstacles or bottlenecks are holding you back from achieving X, and how can I help remove these? Instead of pestering him, offer sincerely to support him. You will get a warmer reply than you would just by emailing him another demand. We usually know what will warm and inspire hearts around us because we know what warms and inspires our own heart. And that is often the key to taking another way towards our life's path. The truth is, at times there are challenges in our life that we didn't wish were there, yet it's up to us to find a way to still get to what we want through them anyways. You know, I just had the experience this week of having pneumonia. And I'm not thankful for it, and I'm not one of those things to say, oh, why did this happen to me, unless it will help me get better sooner. I don't like asking any of that. But what I did learn really quick is that the things that I normally do that make me feel really happy or fulfilled or one with spirit or at peace, I couldn't do anymore. I couldn't sit up and meditate and feel in a good state in the morning, so I couldn't feel a connection. I couldn't come up and give and talk to you, which always makes me feel so good. I couldn't do all the things that I like to do that help me feel really happy and like I've accomplished a lot. And so I could look at the pneumonia and say, oh, this is this horrible thing that's keeping me from what I want. Or I could say, you know what, I've got to do the best I can with this circumstance to still get to that love or still get to that peace of mind wherever it is. So I couldn't meditate in the morning, but when I was lying down at night, I would say a prayer. And I couldn't do a lot, but I could ask for a lot of support and feel really supported and loved. I couldn't always feel great, but I could take some time and think about precious moments in my life that I had kind of forgotten about, things that had led me to where I was. So I was able to find some grace in the process, even though I'm not all the way better yet, and I'm certainly not thankful for getting sick. But what I am thankful for is to be able to remember the best I can what the central focus of my life is. And when you're clear on the central focus of your life, there's no such thing as getting lost. There's no such thing as turning away. There's no such thing really as an other way, because you're walking with the thing that you're seeking at your center. And the greatest spiritual truth of all is if we're ever seeking anything outside of ourselves, we've got a long way to go. The idea is to find the divine inspiration within, that thing that we're seeking so that we can cultivate and create it in our lives. Our way is lost when we forget where we want to go. When the path we're on brings us to frustration, we have to move not away from it, but through it another way, a loving way, an honest way. To close with a quote from Holmes, all humanity is divinity, waking up to itself through self-discovery and self-realization. One more time. All humanity is divinity, waking up to itself through self-discovery and self-realization. Our very being is an act of God. Our very being is a demonstration of the divine. But it's again our volition, our choice to approach ourselves as divine, as sacred beings, or as troubled, complicated, struggling organisms, you know? It's really up to us to embrace and nurture that divine in ourselves and to bring it to wherever we are on our path, knowing that bringing that divinity is what transcends, what transforms, and what guides us with a light, even in the sense of darkness. So just with a prayerful moment of closing, I just invite us to become as conscious as we can of that divinity within us, knowing that our very being is the process of bringing that divinity into greater form, greater light, greater realization. Becoming aware of anything that may seem an obstacle on our path. Maybe it is a challenge of being a parent. Maybe it is a challenge of being a partner. Maybe it is a challenge of feeling too young or too old or not experienced enough. Whatever that challenge is, know that our very divinity gives us the very ability to transcend and transform. In gratitude for the divine in us and all of the wonderful grace, forgiveness, and miracles it creates, we let it be, and so it is. Thanks for your time, everyone.